Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Joining us now, Mindy Isser. She's a writer focused on labor issues and reporting based in Philadelphia. Mindy, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we are in day 3, I guess, now of this vote in Alabama at a Mercedes-Benz facility. This is coming in the wake of the really, in many ways, historic win by the UAW at the Volkswagen Tennessee plant. Just contextualize this. I mean, the South is, I think most people know, the South is very, very ununionized. I don't know how else. There's a lot of hostility towards unions, certainly by the establishment in the South. And the idea is to get it less so and introduce it to the workers. But give us a context for what's happening today relative to the past.
Yeah, so you're exactly right. The South is the region in this country that has the lowest union density. South Carolina is the least unionized state, but Alabama, Tennessee, North Carolina, they're very close by. So that kind of creates like a vicious cycle feedback loop where workers don't have any experience even seeing unions existing, seeing the union difference, seeing how unions mean higher wages, better benefits, more safety in the workplace, all of those things. So organizing is quite hard because of that and because of what you said, the political landscape. Politicians in the South are very anti-union. A few Southern governors have put out a joint statement about the UAW. So just to show you how anti-union this region is. And yeah, the win at Volkswagen in Chattanooga was huge, was exhilarating, I think, for any labor enthusiast and should be for any worker in the South. And now they are workers at Mercedes and Vance are voting, and I think it's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough one to win. And similarly, this was the third union election at Volkswagen in Chattanooga, so it took 3 tries for them to actually win there.
I want to talk a little bit about like sort of in the past. I know that the CIO, the Congress of Industrial Organizations, launched, and you wrote about this, Operation Dixie, back in the 40s in an attempt to unionize there. Why has the South historically been so successfully anti-union? Like why? I think, just the idea that we're saying the South as opposed to like, the Southwest or, why the South as a region has that been historically so difficult for unions to break through?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's racism. I mean, really, that's really the key. It's the history of slavery, the history of Jim Crow, the history of agricultural work, and slave owners, and then once slavery became illegal, people who either used to be slave owners or had the same economic interests as slave owners, not wanting workers to have rights, to have power, and to use racism as a wedge between workers uniting. And that was seen during Operation Dixie. That's why the CIO failed. It's the main reason. Also, the anti-communism at the time didn't help, other factors, but that really was the main reason. And we still see that today. We're seeing it in the union fight at Mercedes. The business community in Alabama is using race as a way to divide workers. The plant is now, I think it's majority Black now, and it used to not be. And so the business community is really targeting Black workers specifically. They had a Black pastor in the region make a video ad to ask workers who look like him to give Mercedes a chance to do the right thing, things like that. So racism is obviously still prevalent, still powerful in our world, and specifically in the South.
How are they weaponizing that now? I mean, like under Jim Crow, right? The idea is that, well, we can keep workers separate and ostensibly do it through race. And so that can really undercut solidarity there. And you're playing off of white workers. Like, do you really want to join a union with black people? That type of thing. And in fact, I think, was it Kelly who wrote Hammer and Hoe, which is a book retelling attempts to organize in Alabama. I think it was in the 20s and the 30s, and how race played such a big part of that. But are they trying to exacerbate racial tensions in this fight, or are they just simply going and finding a pastor they can sort of support the church, I guess, or whatever it is, and provide some benefits and say, this is, speak to your people?
I think it's just more specific targeting to black workers, that like maybe unions are like, a white people thing or like a northern thing. They don't understand our culture, just from the things I've seen. And I mean, I saw that Governor Ivey said that the UAW, I mean, she should have just called them Jews. She was like, the UAW is like a shifty, dangerous leech on society. So I think playing up some of that same kind of like anti-Semitism, anti-communism that we saw during Operation Dixie as well.
Ivy actually just signed a bill that says it's SB 231. She signed this on Friday of last week. The new law withholds economic incentives that the state offers to lure a company into the state if it voluntarily recognizes their union, or if the union does not hold a secret ballot during an election. In other words, if there's a new National Labor Relations Board ruling where if you basically have card check and it works, that the management has to actually step in and affirmatively say, hey, that's not a valid vote. And so we need to push it to a secret ballot, which then gives them time theoretically to union bust. This is I guess the third state to have a law like this, but this is like super aggressive.
Yes. And it's exactly why we need to pass the PRO Act, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, which sort of would make like all of the things that the Mercedes workers are having to deal with right now. The entire goal is not even necessarily to turn workers anti-union. It's to confuse them enough that they're like, I'm just going to either sit this one out or I'm just going to vote no. It's too much change. It's too confusing. They just put like, it's like to put a little seed of doubt in your ear, and then every single day, just constantly get growing that seed bigger and bigger and bigger. And what the PRO Act would do would actually, like we have laws technically that are supposed to protect workers against these things, from their employers, surveilling them and intimidating them. But in actuality, we really don't. And so what the PRO Act would do would force employers to have to disclose how much money they're spending on union busting. It would actually impose a legitimate civil penalty up to $50,000. It would hold employers personally responsible if they know about violations but don't address them. It would make captive audience meetings illegal. And it would also crucially force employers to get to the bargaining table immediately, because something that I think a lot of people don't know is that nearly 50% of new unions never get to a new contract because employers stall. And so actually having labor laws that would protect workers would help workers in the South so much.
And my understanding is that the Jennifer Abruzzo, the general counsel of the National Labor Relations Board, is looking into whether, I mean, Cemex case is sort of like a little bit of, like a card check light type of situation. But there's also a question of whether you can force mediation onto two parties if the National Labor Relations Board finds or creates as a policy that not having a contract after 6 months of unionization is in and of itself an unfair labor practice, and therefore it would start, 6 months, 3 months, 12 months. I'm not sure what the timeline would be, but then you get forced mediation. But along those lines, in the absence of a federal law, from a strategic standpoint, did the UAW target Volkswagen and Mercedes first for these things? Because these are German companies, and Germany has a law that says these companies cannot, they have to be neutral when a union is coming in. And I wonder, and I know that the UAW has filed a couple of complaints with the German government about Mercedes behavior in the States. But I wonder, like in the case of like this law just signed in Alabama, could even a Mercedes do anything but not contest a card check rule under Cemex because they're constrained by German law?
That's interesting. I don't know the answer to that, but I know, and I don't know the UAW strategy. I can say that Volkswagen, I think, did remain neutral actually in all three elections, which is why I think it was such a hard pill to swallow that the first two union elections were not victorious. But Mercedes has been union busting, I think, quite intensely. They got like a new CEO 2 weeks ago. So they told workers to give him a chance. They've, I think, created some kind of anti-committee in the plant. Like there are workers wearing, vote no hats and things like that. There are signs all over the plant that say vote no. And then, of course, the business community in Alabama has like billboards up when you leave the plant that's like vote no. There are websites, there's stuff on Facebook. I mean, these workers are getting it from all angles.
And when are we going to know the results?
Voting ends Friday, so I'm not sure if votes will be counted on Friday or early next week, but we will know soon. And my personal prediction is that it's going to be very, very close. And I think, even if it is a loss, that will be a huge loss. And I don't want to downplay it. But again, it took workers at Volkswagen 3 tries. And I think when they get an awesome contract, other auto workers who have been on the fence, auto workers in the South who have been on the fence, who don't know much about unions, who are scared, whatever, who are listening to their bosses, their governors, they're going to see the big wins at Volkswagen and say, hey, I want that too.
Mindy Isser, we'll put a link to your piece in in These Times. Sorry about that. And at majority.fm. And thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.